This is our acrylic color mixing sampler lesson. Our objectives are understand basic color theory and demonstrate technical skill when mixing secondary and tertiary colors, chromatic black, and different grays. So here are two examples of what our color chart looks like. You're going to need some paint. So you're going to need your cool red, alizarin crimson, cool blue, cerulean blue, cool yellow, cadmium yellow light, warm red, cadmium red medium. I've also used cadmium red deep. Warm blue, ultramarine blue, warm yellow, primary yellow. You're also going to need titanium white. You're going to need a 3/4 inch flat brush. You're going to need palette paper and or a palette. I just use a bunch of palette paper usually. A giant water cup, paper towels, and a color wheel. You also might want to play around using matte medium or gloss medium as a mix instead of water. So for your sampler, this is what we're making. You're going to do 6 squares. They're just going to be the warm and cool primaries that we're using. You could do them around the bottom or the top. You're going to do 3 secondary color mixes. So you're going to mix a variety of oranges, violets, and greens using those different primaries. You're going to do a yellow and violet scale. And then you're going to do a complement scale, which need to be 2 tertiary colors. For example, it needs to be red, violet, and blue, green. But you can choose which ones you do. You're going to do 1 square of chromatic black, so you're going to mix your own black. Then you're going to do 3 squares of 3 different grays, which are going to be the primary and secondary complementaries and white. So for example, yellow and violet, red and green, blue and orange. So to set up, you're going to need your palette paper. You're going to split your colors into warm and cools until you can just recognize them by sight. You do not need as much paint as you think. I know it's really soothing to squeeze that paint tube like it's a tube of toothpaste, but do not squeeze all the colors. Only use what you put on your palette, what you're going to use. You can always add more. So if you're starting with orange, you don't need blue yet. If you're starting with green, you don't need red yet. Down here is a palette that a kid left at the end of class once. You can see how much paint was left. There are colors of paint on there they didn't even use. So as you get used to using acrylic paint, at some point you probably are going to waste paint, but try to become mindful of how much you actually need on your palette. So the first thing you're going to do is do the sampler of squares of our colors that we're going to use, and then you are going to label them. So I labeled them warm and cool, and then the color name. Then you're going to start by mixing your secondary colors. So they're a combination of the warm and the cool, and then the 2 warms together. So some tips and tricks. When you're mixing orange and green, mix the opposite color into the yellow. So if you're mixing orange, start with yellow and add a tiny bit of red. If you're doing green, start with yellow, add a tiny bit of blue. Yellow is not very powerful, and if you start with red when you're mixing orange, you're just going to have to use a ton of yellow to get it to orange. Same thing, if you're mixing green, you're going to have to use a ton of yellow if you start with blue. So always start with yellow if your color has yellow in it. Keep checking your color wheel to make sure it's correct. You don't want your orange to be yellow orange or red orange. You don't want your green to be yellow green or blue green. So keep checking it as you go. Add a small amount of water so the paint flows smoothly. If you add too much, it's going to get kind of splotchy. Rinse your water cup after every color so you're not adding pigment into your colors when you're mixing them. And use a flat brush and gentle brush strokes to create edges. So you're going to have your brush, you're just going to press it just a little bit right up to the edge and then pull, pull, pull. Don't press it too hard, and then just make sure you're taking your time. Try to make those edges as crisp as you can. And if you start painting and all of a sudden it starts getting splotchy or chunky, that means it's starting to dry. You need to stop, let it dry, and then go back over it after it's dry. And this will become really important once we start making actual paintings. So when you're mixing your black, What I like to use is 80% ultramarine blue, 15% alizarin crimson, 5% primary yellow. You can experiment with the different primaries if you'd like, but this is usually my go-to. When you're mixing your grays, the tone's going to vary based on which primary colors you're using. So as you're mixing, your gray might have a warm or a cool tone to it. So you can see in my grays, my blue plus orange plus white has more of a warm tone, while my other two have more of a cooler tone. If your color mix is too brown, so you're mixing your gray, you put some white in it, and this looks like mud, this looks like brown. You want to add the cool or warm complement in there to tone it down. If you need help with that in class, of course, ask. And like I said, make sure it's gray. Make sure you're not mixing brown or any other color. It needs to look gray. So mixing your complements. When you're doing yellow and violet, you're going to put yellow in the middle of the value scale. And then you're going to add white for the tints. You're going to add the opposite, which is violet, for the tones. So you're going to add a small amount of violet into the yellow. If it starts to get really brown, like too brown, you can add a small amount of red back in there to kind of keep it yellowy. Usually this isn't too bad of a problem for me though. With violet, since it's already so dark, you're going to put that at the end of the color of the value scale, and then you just add white. So mix your violet, paint it, put a little bit of white, mix it, take what's on your brush, add a little bit of white, mix it, and then go along. So for blue, violet, and yellow, orange, blue, violet, again, since it's a violet, is going to go on the end of the scale. Yellow, orange goes in the middle. If your yellow, orange looks a little too cool or green, you can go back in and add a small amount of red to kind of keep it in that yellowy family. But yellow, orange, kind of like yellow, as it gets darker, looks a little bit more brown. All right, so red, violet, and yellow, green, if you choose this one. Red, violet, since it's violet, is at the end of the scale, and you just add white as you go along. Yellow, green is a middle value, so you want to put it at the middle of the value scale. And as you add red, violet into the yellow, green, if it starts to look red, like really like muddy, add a little bit of blue back in there and it will keep it green. All right, last, red, orange, and blue, green. Both of these go in the middle. And then as you're mixing, so your red, orange, if it starts to look green because you added blue, green into it to tone it down, you can add a little red back in there. And then with blue, green, if you're seeing it, it's just getting a little too warm, you can add a little blue back in there. So all this whole project is learning about looking at that color and knowing what to add in it to get it to look the way you want. And this is a really, really good skill to have, and it's going to help you in any other painting that you do. All right. So our whole project is the sampler. So just as a reminder, you're going to do your 6 squares of warm, cool primaries. You're going to do 3 secondary color mixes, your orange, violet, green. You're going to do a yellow, violet scale. You're going to pick 2 tertiary complements. So for example, red, violet, or blue, green. You're going to do 1 square of black, and then you're going to make 3 different grays using a primary, secondary, and white complement. There is a demo video of me painting this. And also, please ask me in class if you need help. If you're just wasting a whole ton of paint because you can't get it, this is the time to ask me for help and I'll show you how to mix it. I really love and enjoy color mixing, so I will love to help you. And then once you are done, we are going to take an image and turn it in, and then don't forget to turn it into the turn-in basket. Good job. I can't wait to see you work, and I can't wait to help you do this. This is a really, really excellent skill to have. Good job.